Grettir at Thorhall-Stead by Frank Norris. Let's go into some biography. Frank Norris's full name is Benjamin Franklin Norris Jr. He was born on March 5th, 1870, and he died on October 25th, 1902, from appendicitis. His father Benjamin was a wholesale jeweler, and his mother Gertrude was at one time an actress. In 1899, he married Jeanette Williamson Black, and they had a daughter, Jeanette Williamson Norris. Really original on the names. Uh, anyways, he lived in Chicago, Illinois, until he was about 14 or 15, and his father moved their family to San Francisco. Um, he studied painting at the Académie Atelier Julian in Paris, France, in 1887, and then he moved on to the University of California at Berkeley in 1890 through 94, and then he studied at Harvard University from 94 to 95 for a little over a year in English and French. Um, Besides posing seductively, he published short stories and wrote novels in his spare time. He worked as a war correspondent in South Africa in the Boer Wars in 1895 through 96, and then he was an editorial assistant, and then later a war correspondent again in 1898 in the Spanish War in Cuba. He is regarded as helping to construct the American naturalistic novel, especially the way that we readers view California in literature. Some of his other works are what I have listed here. He didn't live very long. He only lived to be 32, and all of his writing happened basically from 1898 to 1902 till his death. They all take places, all of his fiction with I don't know, a nonfiction flair, they all take places in locations where he's lived. So, for instance, the first one, Moran of the Lady Letty, a story of adventure off the California coast. And then two down, McTeague is one of his most famous works, and it's a novel, and it takes place in San Francisco, where he moved and lived out his life and died there. And then again, The Pit is a story of Chicago. So he only writes about places that he's been, like Chicago and California or San Francisco and the surrounding area. So let's get into some background of Grettir. Grettir's last name is Asmunderson, so his full name is Grettir Asmunderson. In Icelandic, the suffix son or dottir is added to the last name. They don't have regular surnames like we do, where it's carried from generation to generation. So Grettir's father is Asmund, so Grettir's last name means literally the son of Asmund. Um, and if he was a female, it'd be the daughter of Asmund, the daughter of Asmund. Actually, I was reading a funny article on the internet a couple weeks ago about an app that's gaining popularity in Iceland, and it helps people from committing incest because they're non-traditional surnames, so you don't really know if you're about to sleep with a far-off relative. Anyways, Grettir is sort of famous because his family is involved heavily in the early settlement of Iceland. His great grandfather Canund, the tree leg. Canund the tree leg moves to Iceland and takes land in Kobiensvik, Kaldbaksvik, and Birgisvik. He's called the tree leg because he lost a battle to Harald Fairhair in Norway, and in the battle he lost his leg, and he sort of had to retreat and fall back to Iceland. Canund has four sons: Grettir, Thorgeir, Askir, and Thorgrim. Thorgrim is Grettir's grandfather. Thorgrim has a son, Asmund, and Asmund has Grettir. Grettir is outlawed when he's 16. He kills Skeggy, which is a farmhand. They fight over a food sack. One claims it's his, the other one claims it's not. It's his, so they fight, and Grettir kills him. Um, there's some there's some question as to whether it was provoked or an unprovoked killing. Uh, in Grettir's saga, Skeggy tries to attack Grettir with an axe, and Grettir wrestles it away from him and kills him. But nobody can prove that it was provoked like that. So, anyways, he's after killing Skeggy, he's outlawed from Iceland. He's outlawed from Iceland for 3 years, and he's forced to go to Norway. Uh, in Norway, he's trying to help save somebody, and he swims across a freezing fjord, and it turns out he accidentally burns down a house with the inhabitants inside. So he's ordered to leave Norway, where he has to return to Iceland, where he's now found out he's become a full outlaw. An outlaw just means a definition of outlaw is someone that's outside of society, so they're outside of the law. They can be killed on sight, or if you gain fame and notoriety like Grettir, people will hunt you down, and there will actually be bounties on your head. So Grettir's back in Iceland, and he fights Kar and Glamir. Kar and Glamir are both Draugrs. I'll get to them in a little bit, what a Draugr is. And he also fights a troll woman at Sandhagar. Um, he's after the fight with Glamour, especially, he's never the same. He's afraid of the dark. There's a curse put upon him by Glamour. He's afraid of the dark, and he basically lives out the rest of his days just stealing sheep and performing little tasks. His strength is never the same, as Glamour says in Grettir Saga and in Grettir at Thorhall-Stead. So, anyways, Grettir's not as strong as he once was, so people are hunting for him. There's a bounty on his head, so he's forced to hide in one extreme location after another. One is Vegras Gogafjall, which is on the on the side of a mountain. Basically, he's living in a cliff and uh, like a hermit type life. People mistake him for a troll, and then after that he goes to Drangi, which is a small island, basically just a rock sticking out of the ocean. That's where he eventually gets found and killed. He gets killed by Thorbjorn Ongul, but it's sort of a unfair fight. Thorbjorn Ongul's foster mother, Thurid, is a sorceress, and Thurid casts a spell on Grettir, and he has a wound on his thigh, and it basically gets infected and spreads to his intestines. And so when Thorbjorn comes across him, he's really weak, and Thorbjorn kills him anyways. A lot of people that Thorbjorn brings with him, his party, say that's unfavorable and that he shouldn't have done it, but he does. He ends up paying for it though. He gets hunted down and killed as well. So Grettir's saga, uh, the the oral tradition is really unknown. The earliest version is thought to be from the 14th century, so the 1300s. But the author is unknown. Many scholars think it's this guy named Sturla Thordarson, and the reason they think it's Sturla Thordarson, the main claim to him being the author is that Grettir's sister Randbeg, Randbeg's great granddaughter, is friends with Sturla, so he actually has a connection to the family, and that's why people think that he's the most probable author. The earliest manuscript is, like I said earlier, said to be from the 14th century, but the oldest extant versions that we have are only from the 15th and 16th centuries. The comparison and contrast, I'll compare here Grettir Saga versus Grettir at Thorhall-Stead by Norris. The time period is way different. Norris's work only covers about a year, a winter, a spring, and then another winter. Whereas in the actual saga, it goes on for years. Um, Glam, Glam or Glamir, they're both the same. He hunts the valley, and he basically kills all the livestock off within the valley, and people are afraid to bring livestock in because of him. They know that he's going to kill it, and his body count is a lot higher in the actual saga than versus the short story. The setting is also different. Norse, being a naturalistic writer, focuses a lot on the landscape, whereas in the saga there is not that much about the landscape. There's some about the landscape, but not as much as Norris likes to spend time on it. Uh, Also, Norris calls Glam or Glamir, same person. He calls him a vampire, which is completely different than what he's supposed to be in the saga. In the saga, he's a Draugr, which is what I have a picture of here. But anyways, Draugrs are undead people like zombies, and they usually stay close to where they're buried, and they guard a treasure of some sort. They live in a mound, a dirt mound, and they guard a treasure of some sort. But also in the saga, it doesn't say this in Norse, but in the saga, Glamir is buried in a cairn, which is basically the body lies where it lays, where they found him, because again he's heavy. Similarly, as in Norris's work, his body's too heavy for them to move, so they just pile rocks around it and make a cairn, which is just like a rock pile with his body underneath. He somehow breaks free and haunts the valley and kills livestock and scares the shit out of people and stuff like that. Um, those are the main differences. Norris's work is pretty closely related. It's, in my opinion, it's just a shorter version of it. It's just a more condensed version of the actual Grettir saga, but it's the main discrepancy I had was he actually uses the term vampires, and I didn't think that Nordic peoples believed in what we think of as a vampire today, which it turns out they don't. He's a Draugr, not a vampire. So that was the main thing that irked me a little bit. And then I have a hypothesis behind Norse's Grettir. It's not a very strong one, but I didn't understand why a naturalist writer like Norse, who's never had much time experiencing Nordic cultures, he goes to Cuba and he goes to Central Africa and South Africa, but I didn't understand why he would want to write a novel like uh, Grettir at Thorhall-Stead, or why he would want to publish a short story under his name. And the reason he does it is a hypothesis I stumbled upon was he does it because the the naturalistic landscape of Iceland, the landscape of Iceland plays an integral part in the sagas and in the heroes, and the barrenness of it reflects some of their barrenness. Grettir is an outsider; he is the other, and therefore he's forced to struggle with the landscape, on the landscape like an animal. Um, and I think that Norris paints that picture to show that Grettir's link with humanity uh, is reflected in humanity's link with the landscape there, or excuse me, not Grettir's, but Glam's link with humanity is reflected in the landscape. Grettir's link to humanity slips. That's why Glam's trying to pull him to the figurative door frame. He's pulling Grettir between worlds. But I think that Norris writes this to focus on the landscape of Iceland and to show that it does play an actual role in something. And it could just simply be he wanted to put it in a magazine so he could get his name out there and have a short story in a magazine, which it seems like he does. It was so. I guess that's it. The end.